Welcome. Another episode of If Be Your Will podcast coming to you. We're on a kind of lazy Saturday morning here, or almost afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I like upping my game as we go into season 4, and I might have upped my game too much here, but I have Gary Olson from my sweetheart band, Ladybug Transistor, and so much else that Gary does. So Gary, thanks so much for hopping on here and sharing some of your stuff.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Right on. So Gary, where are you coming in from? You told me before, but I'd love for people to know where you're coming in from because it's interesting.
Paradise Falls, Pennsylvania, in the Poconos. Visiting some friends and family this weekend, but I'm a regular out here when I'm not in
Cool.
New York.
Right. And you've been in Brooklyn forever. Hey, Gary, is that accurate to say?
Yeah, I was born and raised there, and I never left.
Right. And you've been living you have a studio within your dwelling. Is that accurate?
That's right. So I've lived in the same house for over 20 years and we've had a functional studio there the entire time. So that's where we've made most of the Ladybug records, and then occasionally work with other people there.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Gary, my first question to artists is like where it all began for you, like early recollections of musical contact that just blew your mind and kind of was a tipping point in your life that kind of started to dictate that music had to be a part of it. Do you have any of those early recollections that you could share with us?
I think there was a lot of listening to the radio when I was a kid and flipping around the dial. Back then, the first things I remember were very like commercial top 40 and rock stations. And then eventually gravitating to the left of the dial where here there was just this mysterious college stations all bunched over to the left side. When I was done sort of with all the commercial stuff, eventually hearing this whole other world that I didn't know existed over there, and really just being just the whole mystery of radio. I didn't know how it was done. I didn't know what it looked like behind the scenes there. I had no idea. So I just had this fascination with it as a kid.
Right. And when you say, like, were you fascinated with how songs were created or how they were assembled, like how the sounds were assembled together? Because I mean, Ladybug is very orchestral, right? Like there's so much instrumentation that's just, I mean, spectacular. Was that things that you were looking, like getting from those earlier radio days?
Yeah, I think so. And just the mystery, trying to figure out how it was done. Because it was just a complete listening experience. There was, there was no way you could see it.
Right. And no way to rewind it either, right? So you got like a one-shot chance of.
Yeah, although we were I remember my brothers and I, we would tape a lot of things off the radio. Right. That was a thing. Just standing by until that song came on and unhitting the pause button.
I remember those days. I talked to my son about cassettes, and he doesn't understand. He's like, I don't understand what you're talking about.
Yeah,
I definitely. And then, so as you were growing up, like, what was the first instrument that you were introduced to playing and started playing it?
I was assigned the trumpet, I think, when I was in junior high school. So that would have been 7th grade. And we had a good music teacher there. His name was, I think, Mr. Fidel. And somehow I became a first trumpet. I'm not that good, but at a junior high school level, I think I was okay. And I probably still am at a junior high school level.
You still though actively play the trumpet? Like I
Uh,
hear often in the songs.
yeah, it's the only instrument I really ever learned how to play properly. I
Okay.
still can't form a chord with my hands if I'm trying to play guitar or
Hmm.
keyboards, but anything that requires a single note at a time, I could have some ability with.
Right. And like, what was your first like venture into songwriting? Like, what was it about putting down thoughts and ideas and experiences from your life on paper and then setting to music that appealed to you so much?
Um, I don't know if there were thoughts and ideas about my life that really inspired, but just trying to figure out the process of recording and having the 4-track there as a tool. And like I mentioned, since I had trouble playing chords and forming my hands in that way, I had a very primitive approach where I'd just layer things on the 4-track,
Hmm.
almost sing one or two notes at a time, and record things in sections instead of actually sitting down and properly learning how to play an acoustic guitar. I was always piecing things together.
Well, so like, how would a song start for you? Would it be a note or two that you would string together, and you're like, okay, this sounds
Yeah,
good, and then another layer would come on, etc.
yeah, and then just piecing them together. And it really wasn't until like I met some proper musicians that helped me sort of form the ideas a little bit more, or I could um it became much more collaborative when I was working with other people later
Right,
on.
right,
And
right.
when it finally came to forming the band, and in the second stage of the band, when Jennifer and Jeff and Sasha and San came along, like we suddenly like I I was in a group with all these musicians who could play their instruments really well, and were sort
Hmm.
of in tune to we were all in tune with each other a bit. So um before that, like the first two Ladybug albums, are some of the songwriting or some of the instrumentation is pretty crude, because a lot of it was me, and with the help of Ed Powers, our first drummer,
Yeah.
um, who played a little bit of guitar on it. But a lot of it was just my very primitive, like 3-string guitar, all tuned to D. And I kind of took that as far as it could go with the first two albums before we did Albemarle
Right,
Sound.
right, right. So Albemarle Sound was really the first kind of collaborative, could I say, band album that you, I mean, recorded, wrote, etc.
Yeah, when Beverly Autumnal came out, the second album, we got signed to Merge, and suddenly we needed to tour a bit
Hmm.
more. And that was around the time that Jennifer and Jeff joined the band. Um,
Right,
and their musicianship really complemented everything that we were doing at the time, and just eventually things started evolving after Beverly Autumnal. We did the Today Knows in Massachusetts single, and that's a bit of a signpost to where we were going with Albemarle Sound,
right,
I think.
right, right. Um, and did your approach change? Like you were saying, the first two records were very much you and your first drummer kind of piecing things together. What was your approach for the third record? Like when you had all these collaborators, did you still keep it fairly tight knit with your original idea, or did it expand with all of these musicians coming into the mix?
Well, we were learning so much at the time, and um, pulling from our influences at the time, and the evolving with our process of how we were recording. So we were listening to a lot of 60s and 70s records, and
Mm,
trying to figure out how to do it. And suddenly we had people who were a bit more capable of trying to do something like that, and then bringing in a string arranger, for example, like Joe McGinty, to sort of bring things to the next level was a big step for us too. Yeah.
It's interesting. And
also
yeah.
I have to say, like, the big difference between the evolution of between Beverly Altanal and Albemarle Sound is suddenly, like, we had 4 songwriters in the group. So Jeff and Sasha and Jennifer and I were all sharing songwriting. We were each bringing 2 or 3 songs to the mix, and then each bringing something to each other's songs, I think.
Right. Interesting. And I mean, you wore 2 hats, or you always seem to wear 2 hats, where you're doing the production side and also, producing the sound. Which one do you prefer, if you could say? Or, like, do you have to change your mindset from, all right, I got to record my part, to, okay, I want the overall sound to sound like this? Like, how do you kind of juggle those two?
Well, doing vocals, it was a real luxury because I could just be alone in the studio with the remote control next to me and do as many takes as I'd like. Even with the limitations of tape back then, I could still do that. I could have absolute privacy for that if I needed it.
Right.
So that was a real bonus. Yeah, sometimes, having someone else engineer could help you be a bit more objective because you don't have to have your hands on everything. But for us, I think it really helped with our obsession to detail at the time, and how we were working to be able to engineer the records at the same time. We had a lot of help through my studio partner, Bill Wells, at the time. And, it wasn't just me with my hands on everything. The whole group really was helping with mixing. We were learning so much back then too, with that record. For example, some of the songs like 6 Times or Meadowport Arch, we were mixing in sections because the mixes were becoming so complicated that we mix the verse and the chorus and the middle 8 separately and cut them together later on. That was a bit of a trick that we learned by listening to, around that time, there were all those great CD box sets coming out time for, like, the Beach Boys, for example, or the Beatles or the Zombies, where you get a little peek of their process at demos or sections of mixes. And, that informed us a lot, I think, too, is just getting that look at, because a lot of those things weren't available much before, unless you really were searching for bootlegs somewhere, and really had to dig hard. But suddenly, you could hear a little bit more about how it was done.
Yeah, well, absolutely, super interesting. And how long did it take to record Albemarle Sound, like, in total time? Like, what was that timeline like to record the original?
I can't remember, but it must have been over 8 to 9 months, I'm guessing. And at the time, we were all living at Marlborough Farm. So Jennifer and I and Sasha and Jeff, we also had 2 couples and a sibling in the past, by the way. We're all under the same roof.
Interesting.
But and San, our drummer, for a time was there too. So we had a lot of time together, and we could work on a mix until the middle of the night if we needed to.
Right. And what song off of that record came in like the wind and just was, like, easy to lay down? And maybe which one was the more complicated ones that took the layerings and the splicings and the are there any songs that match that?
I think for simplicity, something like Oceans in the Hall.
Mm, yeah.
Um, when we were putting together the extra tracks for the anniversary edition, I found the demo for that, and I hadn't heard that in many years, and I was surprised at how formed it was in its demo state. Um,
Oh,
I think Jeff had done that all on his. Jeff Barron had recorded that all on his 4-track and handed it to me, and I just did a quick vocal and trumpet. And that one, I think, didn't change. That one was really easy to get down from what I remember. The more complicated ones were definitely Meadow Port Arch and Six Times. Probably Meadow Port Arch because of all the time shifting, and the mix was a little more dense for that one.
right, right. So, I mean, you're on the cusp then of releasing this 25th anniversary coming out in November of this year. People get it, and you're heading out on tour, which is amazing. How did you choose these? So, I have a. I'll tell everybody what's coming on it because I found it. So you have 12 bonus tracks, and then you have rare B-sides, 4-track demos, instrumentals, and alternate mixes. How did you choose all the extra stuff that appears on the 25th anniversary?
Well, originally I didn't think we had much, and we were going to do a straight reissue. And I was at a friend's studio earlier this summer, and he had these 2 working reel-to-reel machines. And as I was sitting there, I had the reissue on my mind, and I thought, well, I should just see what I have around. I knew I had a few pieces, but I didn't think I had enough for a set. And then when I got home that evening, I dug out all the old reels of the masters, which I hadn't put up in 25 years, and turned on the tape machine and just prayed to God that it still worked. and I did some transfers right away while everything was working, and and found a few bits on there, and found enough of the 4 tracks around, and we had an enormous amount of DAT tapes. I don't know if you ever worked with those before, but they're digital audio tapes, and they can be very finicky. Either the player or the tapes themselves break down. But I sent them off to a transferring service, and a couple of weeks later, they all came back. So I was able to put together these 11 or 12 pieces, and once they were all in one place, I realized we had enough for something. Something that might complement the original release a little bit, as far as like getting into the process of it all.
Yeah. And were there happy surprises when you were digging through these archives?
It's something that's really funny, to me at least, is the Six Times, the full length version. We did this little intro. It's a backwards piano that starts it off. It's the bridge between Oriental Boulevard and Six Times.
Right.
And it's just this little snippet that's about 10 seconds long. But I found 3 takes of that, and they're all vary a little bit. Some of them wow up a little bit. Some of them are a little longer. So I included them all right before Six Times really kicks off. Fun little things like that.
Yeah. It's kind of like fun surprises too, after all that time of not listening to something that you had done in the past. Did listening to those also flood back memories of the recording times and living all together in the house? And like, I often notice when I listen to something or smell something or see something from the past, it wafts back these memories of experiences and whatnot.
Yeah, it really did.
Did any of that happen, like, for you? Yeah, as well.
But it's amazing how much I can't remember about how we did it. So it is really like listening to another person sometimes, and also just the way we've all evolved in the way that we record back then. I mean, that was Albemarle Sound was a fully analog recording on a 16 track, 1-inch machine mixed down onto tape. And everyone's gotten away from that. Most people have over the years. So the whole process has changed so much. They hear this thing that definitely has a different dynamic and breathes more than how music is recorded today. I was pretty happy with it. I think we were trying to go for a very natural sound at the time. As far as microphone placement and not using too much reverb, and I don't even think I put a snare on a mic on the snare for most of those recordings. So it just, I was surprised at like how much my approach has changed for better or for worse.
That's interesting. Right. I mean, I listened back through all the Ladybug records, but then I listened back to your self-titled record as well. And I love that record. I never thought you got enough credit for that release that you put out, that single, not single, but your self-titled.
Thanks. It came out at it came out at a bit of a difficult time in 2020 at the peak of COVID. So there were so many other things going on in the world that it was a hard one to promote for a couple of years.
Yeah, I heard some bands too would just they held on to their COVID records to release after, just because so much got lost in the shuffle of that.
Yeah.
Like, really traumatic time for most people. Musicians as well, because suddenly your job just stopped. It was like on pause for everything. And I guess I wanted to ask too, Gary, is like, where did the idea to do this 25th? Where did that spark come from, that we'll reissue this and we'll add in a bunch of 4 tracks and B-sides, etc.? Was that something that you had always thought about? Or was it something that just happened like recently?
Well, about 6 years ago, we got an offer. Ladybug got an offer to play at a festival in Norway, and we hadn't all that lineup, the 1999 to 2003-ish lineup hadn't played together in well over 20 years. So we had this opportunity to play this one-off show, and wasn't sure like how it would go, because we all live in different cities these days. Very far away. Sasha's out in Montana, Jeff's in Burlington, Vermont. Julia and I are in Brooklyn, and Jennifer's in Pittsburgh. So so we met up together, of all places, in this far off corner of Norway, and that happened to coincide with the 20th anniversary of Albemarle Sound. So the concert, the show, the idea of that show was that it was for the 20th anniversary, and we realized that we could do it again, and with a little bit of effort, like all get together. And that led us to doing a few shows last year. We did a 5-day tour from New York out to Chicago, and we knew the 25th year was coming upon us. So it seemed like a good time to, if we were ever going to assemble all of those extra bits and do a proper vinyl reissue that was easily available, it seemed like a good year to mark the occasion.
Sure. Yeah. Amazing. Well, I think your fans are extremely happy. I'm extremely happy that this is coming out. And this one question came up just as you said it. So it had been, you said 20 years that you guys had not played together. Was that
combination of people? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And what was that like, that first show playing together again?
It was really funny, because we all arrived in a small town called Egersund, Norway, about 4 or 5 days before the show, and the first thing they did is throw us all in a house together. A lighthouse, in fact. And here we are, like after like having lived together 20 years previously, like all back under the same roof.
That's crazy. Flashback.
The good thing it was a very small town, so we didn't have much else to do. So we actually just sat around and practiced for 4 days and did the show and realized we enjoyed each other's company.
That's cool. That's great. Well, Gary, this has been really fascinating. I hope to talk to you again sometime in the future.
I'd be happy to come back. More.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I like to stay to the 25 minutes. We've gone a little bit over, but I can't stop asking you questions, so we'll have to do this again, Gary. It's just so fascinating looking at your history too of your catalog and what you've produced, and it has this aesthetic that gets me every time. The openness, the connect. You know, it always connects me to nature in some way. Like I always feel like I tend to always listen to Ladybug out in the country. Rarely in the city, but in the country, I blast it, and it just it's my soundtrack. So I thank you for putting out all these wonderful records and making the new world, you know, or the youngies aware of this great record that you guys put out all those years ago. So thanks for coming and sharing your thoughts on it and talking about it.
Well, it's good to join you, Chris. I'd be glad to talk any other time, and we'll come up and see you one of these days.
Oh, please, I'll be front row. So all you listeners out there, remember November 2024, the Ladybug Transistor is putting out their 25th anniversary of the Albemarle Sound. Unbelievable. Gary, again, all the best. Good luck in your touring as well. I'm sure you're going to be hitting the road a little bit with this. And I envy the people that get to go and listen to it.
Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure.
All right, cool. You take care of yourself.
Okay. Talk to you next time.
Bye.
Just a minute before the alarm, in the morning when I hear them talk, but it blew everything that you said. Your words passed through the wall. Things are piled